Hello, I'm very excited to be here. I was here last year and I got an amazing experience, so I'm really glad I got invited once again. Who doesn't want to talk about testing and in particular like testing hell like this early in the morning, I'm really glad you're here. So tell me a bit about you. Raise your hand if your tests make you angry or you feel like they are painful to write. Okay, we know it, right? So it is good because I came here with solutions, which I think is really important. My biggest idea is we just delete the test. If we don't have tests, we don't have a problem anymore. Thank you, that was good. Okay, well, this is obviously a joke. Let me present myself. So my name is Sofia Lescano Carroll. I'm a senior developer at a Canadian company called Benevity. I live in Madrid. We have a lot of sun, but right now you have more sun than we have in this precise moment. I'm Argentinian and Spanish, but I'm much more than that. I have 2 lovely cats. I travel the world. I'm kind of a professional dancer and also a writer. I just published my book, so I'm really excited to be able to say that. I think that, what about my company? So Benevity is what we call a goodness platform. What we do is move money all around the world. The idea is that we sell a platform to companies so that employees can engage and do both donations and volunteering, which is really, really amazing when you are working with something that you feel that has a real purpose and meaningful for your life. So I really recommend it. So if we are not going to delete our tests, let's remind ourselves, why do we even write them, right? Well, one of the things why I'm writing tests is because it's really difficult to know the whole application. I've been working on monoliths with a lot of developers, and testing is a way of documentation. When I'm reading a code that I don't understand, sometimes I just go to the test and I try to understand what are the paths the developers thought were important and what are the common errors that can happen. This gives me a sense of what the code is trying to do. You can imagine that what you want to do about the testing is verifying that the app is working as expected. You want to prevent regressions. The idea is that you make sure that while you keep developing, you are not getting down on the features you already built. And the magic thing about this is that this doesn't work, is that it's automated. I mean, you could be doing again and again your test, but it's going to be very painful. So having a CI and having everything written and just can replay it as many times as you want is really useful. So for me, it really gives me peace of mind when I'm developing and confidence in my code. So when the tests are correctly written, usually this is what should happen. You have a failing test, and you have 2 options. Maybe you just change your code, so you need to update the test. That is good, that is completely normal. Or you just found that there is a problem in your application. Amazing, I mean, your test is helping you have better code. But what happens if you can't trust your tests? This is when it becomes funny. So what is what we call a flaky test or an unstable test? So a test is said to be flaky or unreliable when it gives both positive and negative results despite no changes of the code or the test. It means you run a test and it passes, you run it again and it doesn't pass, and you run it again and you actually don't know what is going to be the result of the test. Since the result of the flaky test is non-deterministic, reproducing and correcting the error can be very complex. So usually when I'm debugging a test, I run it, I see the error, and I try to figure out what's happening. But if I can't even run it and make it fail, because I don't know in which condition it's going to fail, it makes me really difficult to try to debug it and fix it. And the funny thing of flakiness, that it can be failing like 1 in 2, 3 in 4, or it can fail once in a while in a very rare condition. That's what makes it very difficult. So if we get back to our situation, you were here, and now you add a fantastic step, which is is the problem in the test or is the problem in the app? And that is really wasting a lot of time to the developers. So the thing is that executing that flaky test multiple times doesn't get you the guarantee that it is or not flaky, because you can have these kind of situations. If you manage to have a negative result and then a positive, you say, okay, well, this is flaky. Of course, I need to fix the test, but I don't have a problem in my application, apparently. But if you run it and it fails, you run again and it fails, you say, okay, maybe there is a problem in my application. Then you run it again and it fails, and you say, yeah, definitely there's a problem. And you run it again, and it passes. So no, the test was flaky, and it was not your application. And you lost a lot of time trying to figure out what was happening with your app. The problem is that usually when you have this kind of tests, you may have not written it. So go and see a test that you haven't written, try to understand what's the goal of the test, try to understand if the app is broken or not can be very difficult. And it takes a lot of time to run them. Imagine that you need to run it on the CI, you need to execute the whole CI to verify this. It can be very painful. And of course, like, we merge and deploy only when all the test passes. So this is a big problem for our ability to deliver. So you have an uncertainty about the status of the application. You have a very big degradation of your capacity to deliver. And developers are frustrating. And this is something you cannot come back from. When people are really angry with the code they are writing and using, they will just maybe leave the company. So maybe it's something that you need to take a look at. And the problem is that at some point, there might be so much noise that we are no longer taking real problems seriously. Imagine that you have a pipeline that is flaking usually. So it went green, it went red, and you say, it doesn't matter, it's probably flaky, okay, so it comes back to green. But at some point, you actually did introduce a problem, and so you lose a lot of time till you actually investigate it, because you don't want to investigate something that is faulty. So this is complicated, and you end up in this kind of conversation when someone says, the test doesn't pass, and the other one say, it's normal, it may just be flaky. Okay, no, it's not normal. We need to take care of this. Another big problem of this is that it is something that can spread very quickly. Okay, so we listen and don't judge. Raise your hand if from time to time you've seen a problem and you've pretended that you didn't see it. Leave it for the developer of the future. Okay, we know it. Doesn't matter. So of course, it's a problem that is known. I found some screenshots from different Slack we had. Like, there are people saying, yeah, well, we are trying to go to production, but we have a flaky test, so it's going to take some time. It's like, oh no, flaky test, strike again. So, well, we can make fun of it, but when you're there, it's not that funny. And I love this one. So after retrying 6 times, it did pass. So we are having a great day. Okay, well, you have to be patient. Okay, so again, not judging, but like, raise your hand if you ever, let's say that you copied some code to produce new code. Okay, so what happens? You have bad tests and you're copying them. Even today, like, Copilot might be even suggesting you to reuse code that already existed, so you're just spreading and spreading the problem. So we copy tests to create new ones, and unfortunately, in a lot of companies, new features are more important than trying to stabilize the stack, and so this problem just keeps going. Okay, so let's try to think, how do we write a very good flaky test? How do we put all the chances in our side to make it fail? These are the main common problems that we can find. First one is poorly written tests, timing issues, dependencies and order problems, and external dependencies. So let's start with poorly written tests. It is funny because it's pretty straightforward, you know? You write tests that are not so great, and you receive results that are not so great. Easy explanation. Let's take a look at this, which is real code. So we have a test. We want to test for a budget that, from the time I create it till the end of the budget, the difference is 1 year. Okay, so I'm a developer, and I just write differences between the start of the budget and end of the budget, 366 days. And I commit. What could go wrong? So of course, we were talking about a B60 or leap year, and this test just at some time stops working. So it was a test that works every single time. No issue. I mean, no issue. Who did this? Why? And then it just stops working. So what do I do? I go and reach out to the developer and say, like, maybe we need to fix that, right? Because you have to imagine that I work for a Canadian company. When I work, they are sleeping. So I woke up, the CI was not working. I changed it, of course, 366 to 365 because I needed the CI to work. I was not spending time on this, but I was trying to think that maybe we can use this as an experience to learn about it. And I don't know if it was a joke or not, but someone says, but it will fail in 2028. So how can I explain to this developer that right now we need to spend some hours to try to understand, have a better testing practices with a test that actually kind of does work? Do we think that this is a problem for the developer of the future? Well, I don't know. Other example, imagine that you are testing invoices and you want to do something that seems real. So you have an invoice for the current month, an invoice for the previous month, and the other previous month. But you're using Laravel, you're using Carbon, and you're using the sub-month. What happened with sub-months is that it doesn't work very well. I mean, there is another function called sub-months no overflow, which will prevent to have this kind of issues, that if you are in the 31 of March and you do one less a month, well, 31 of February doesn't exist. So this is a test that works almost every day, but in some particular days, it doesn't work. And so what did my colleague say? Sofia, come on, we don't test on the 31 of the month. Okay. Well, of course, you may know one of the clues for fixing this is having a clock interface and try to not depend on concrete dates. Another thing, usually what happens is a non-clear understanding of your business logic. There's a lot of people that like randomness in tests, and that may be okay. Imagine that you have an e-commerce, you have a client and a brand, and so you say, well, okay, random client, random brand, a client is buying from the brand, I check the cart, I check the price, but you're working in the European Union, and usually the countries are from the European Union, but then you have UK, and the taxes are different, and so randomly, from time to time, it will not work. And this is just a non-understanding of your business logic and exactly what you want to test. This is one that I found years ago that was really funny. Personally, when I write variables, I use like foobar or some strings sometimes, but there are people that like unique ID. Unique ID can be or not prefixed. When you prefix it, just like it's on the bottom, the prefix is put before. So unique ID is a function that takes a timestamp and adds some randomness. So mostly, as it's hexa, it's considered as a string. But in some rare cases, and this is really dependent on the date and the time that you're running the test, it could be cast as an int, because it could be only numbers. Well, this is a funny one. Something that happened to us, which is, well, poorly written test, but also related to infrastructure, is that we were using SQLite, but in production we had MySQL, so we decided that we wanted our test to be more close to production. The thing is that the IDs are managed differently between SQLite and MySQL, and so we were hard-coding IDs that were not reset the same way, and it's okay if you need to fix 1 test, 2 tests, 10 tests. But if you need to fix 10% of the test of your database because you've been doing this all along, and this is preventing you from doing a hardware update that is really important for your company, well, it's sad. Another common issue is the dependency with feature flag. Imagine that you're writing an end-to-end test, and you have some code that is introduced under a feature flag. The test is not explicit about the value of feature flag, and somehow someone changes the value of that feature flag in the test environment, and then the test doesn't pass anymore. Another common use case are timing issues, and they might be a little bit difficult to catch. Here we have 2 examples. These are end-to-end tests. The first one is quite straightforward. I mean, the error is telling me that there was a timing issue. There was a timeout. I was trying, let's say, to find a button. The UI was not refreshed in time, so I couldn't click the button. The second one is a little bit more tricky, because even if it says that there's a problem of price, it is actually a timing issue. Is that there was a timeout, so some items were not added to the cart, and then the cart price was wrong. Test dependency and ordering. I've seen this in the past, and this is a very bad idea. Also because if you have dependent tests, you will not be able to do things such as how do we say it? Mutation testing. Imagine that you have an entity and you say, OK, I need to test the creation, the addition, add the listing. And you say, I mean, I just created a brand, so I can just edit the brand I just created, and then I can list the brands that I just created. So this means that, for example, if the listing brands test if the create brand test fails, the other ones are going to fail. But it doesn't mean that nor the editing or the listing functionalities are failing. It's just the tests are depending on each other. Another thing that could happen is that if you have a test that needs some kind of configuration, and you forget to clean up that after the end of your test, other tests might be affected. Or even 2 tests that need different configurations but are run in parallel in the CI might be affecting each other. And this is really hell. Like, the concurrency problem is that usually you are going to test something in your local, and it's going to pass every single time. But then on how you test in your CI is not going to pass anymore, because you're probably difficult to reproduce this parallelism in your local. So it's kind of difficult to catch. And the last one is external dependencies. I have an example that we do in our company, but we assume it because we need it. So mostly we move money around the world, so it's super important that the payment system is working. And so we use a sandbox in our test, but we don't control that sandbox, so that might be unstable, and that might make our test fail. OK, how can we tackle this problem? Well, anytime that you want to tackle a problem, it's very important that you understand the problem. Might seem obvious, but it is important. And for me, this problem is both a human problem and a technical problem. And I think the most difficult thing about our jobs is actually working with other people. So the thing is, it's interesting to be aware. Maybe you don't have flackiness in your test right now, and I hope for you that this is not your case. But with a large code base and a lot of developers, this may happen sooner or later. So it's interesting to understand how you can fight this anyway. So you can understand the impacts, measure, improve your testing practices, have the right tools, and establish a strategy for this. Understanding the impacts come from both sides, the developers and the product and management. The thing is, for a little developer in his room, it is way easier to replay the test and hope that it passes. It is going to take a few seconds to push a button, some minutes to wait for the CI, but you don't need to think about the problem, try to solve it. It's much more complex. But the problem is that at a company level, a flaky test can potentially fail on every running workflow until it's fixed or ignored. So your little selfish actions may be impacting all the developers of your company. And that is what is really important to understand. And at a company level, all the time we have spent this kind of issue is really a waste of time, and is actually costing money, not only for the developers, but also because we are running and rerunning the CI, and this has a cost overall at the end. So you need to understand that this is a collective effort. I mean, I can systematically fix a flaky test, but if I'm just alone in my corner, this will not really work. And we need to allocate time with it and understand that our stack stability is important. Measuring and quantifying the problem, the thing is that if you can measure it, you can manage it. So here are some ideas. You need to make it visible to make people understand that this has a cost. So you can track the time you spend on it, for example, with Jira tickets. You can count the occurrences of those flaky tests. You can try to measure the consequences that this is having on your release, like delay on the releases or how many releases are affected, and measure the evolution, because if you are going to put a plan to try to fix it, the idea is this working? Is this worth it? If not, you can just stop. Right? Improving testing practices. You can train your developers, either internally or externally. It's really important that you share the errors you encounter, and this is a bit the point of the conference as well. It's like, if I show you this kind of errors, you may probably not reproduce them or think about it at some point when you're writing your test. And review the test and not just the code. I mean, I want to believe that if people actually read that 366 line code, they would not have approved it. I don't know. Having the right tools and learning how to use them, I will present some of them. You can use Circle CI, which is a continuous integration and deployment tool. You have, for example, Datadog, which is an infrastructure and application monitoring. Allure, which is an automation test and reporting tool. So, really interesting. On the left, you have Allure. Allure is showing you the history of the test and saying if it passed or not. If I'm doubting if something is flaky, but I know that like 2 minutes ago it passed, this gives me a lot of information to try to find the flakiness instead of inspecting my whole application to try to find out why this test broke. And the same thing is done by Circle CI and other tools, is that it is capable to flag a test with a flakiness because he knows that on the same commit it passed it and it did not pass. You can have with Circle CI an overall vision to know how many tests you have, how many tests are flaky, what are the ones that are failing the most, so maybe the ones that you have more interested to take a look at it. Datadog is quite powerful on this. I haven't used it, but I know that it exists, is that you can also ignore a flaky test. Imagine my payment issue. The payment sandbox was down, so everything is flagged as flaky, but I know that they are not flaky per se, so I can go and ignore them to have a better vision of which tests are flaky in my database. Circle CI allows you to rerun a subset of tests or a step to save time. This is very useful. You don't need to rerun your whole pipeline to be able to have a positive outcome. Sometimes you really know that a test that has already been known as flaky, but you want to merge your pull request because you know there's no problem. And so you can just rerun a subset and save a lot of time. Another idea that we put in place, and it actually makes us win a hackathon, which is using a static analyzer such as PHP Stan to implement your own rules and secure the code and help your own developers. When you think about what we talk about some month and some month no overflow, I can create a custom rule that will detect that this has been used and is actually helping the developer. So it's not allowing you to commit that kind of code, and it's saying you what we think should be the good solution for it. So the idea is not to blame people, but really give them the tools that will help them be better and have a better code base. OK. So if it happens that your test is just infected with flaky test, it is interesting to know some workaround strategies you could put in place. This will depend either if your deployment is manual or automated. Right now in my company, the deployment is kind of semi-manual. So what we do is that those tests about payment that can be flaky, they are separate in a test suite. And these, if they fail, the whole CI will not fail. It will be flagged with a tag, and then the developer could choose if he wants to proceed or not, having that information. But the idea is, if for any reason that sandbox is down, but I need to fix other problems with my code, I don't want to be completely blocked. So it's like an emergency path that I can use if needed. So that's the idea a bit of the force merge. Like if I know that my pipeline did not fail for a real problem, maybe I can force merge. Because there's this super fun thing about unstable testing is like having another unstable test that prevents you from fixing an unstable test, and you're just running in circles. This is, yeah, you create a pair to skip a flaky test, and then you find 2 new ones, and then you're just like, OK, what can I do? Of course, manual verification about this. I'm not saying, yeah, go and force merge everything. And, well, with great power comes great responsibility. Imagine that you have an automated deployment, which is amazing. I have the example of the GitHub merge queue. The GitHub merge queue is automating the merge and release creation process. But it relies highly on the pipeline and the testing. And it means that you can no longer just merge and solve the problem. So what does the merge queue do? It tries to find a subset of pull requests that can be merged together to create a release. But the thing is that each time he puts some pull requests together and it doesn't work because the test doesn't pass, he thinks that something is wrong, the PRs are incompatible, and take one out. So, but the thing is that if it's taking one out just because of a flaky test, you're just losing runs and runs and blocking completely the merge queue. So the thing is that a single flaky test can block the merge queue for hours. What we did in the past was creating a retry strategy. So you can configure this to make sure that you give another chance to the tests that have not passed to try to not have to rerun the whole CI. But be very careful about this. The thing is that amazing to have a retry strategy, but of course it increases the pipeline execution time, and it just keeps hiding the problem. That's why you need to measure it and be conscious about it. You can define a process, which I think is super important. I'm really fan of processes, which is like report a new flaky test. If I'm working on something and the test doesn't pass, but my colleague just said that he found out that this is flaky, this is saving me hours of time, because I don't need to investigate and think about it and everything. So just kind of please, if you see a flaky test, tell everyone. I think it's very important. Our policy was to deactivate the test. I know that this will break the test coverage, but the thing is that if that test is creating more problems than it's helping us, well, maybe you can deactivate it temporarily, and of course, treat it as using technical debt. OK, it's not so easy, right? You can have the tools, you can have the ideas, but then reality comes back, and it's not that easy. So some challenges and limitations we found. First, like, if you see this, take control of the situation as soon as possible. The more the problem progresses, the more difficult it is to fix. we have a process, but of course it's easier to replay the test. So I really believe in inspiring by example rather than denounce people. Value the work of the people that are involved, either by bonuses, promotions, making sure that we know that this is the path to go. You can also leave nice comments for those people or some kudos. And at the end, maybe the answer is ultimately to delete the test or test differently. Because if you think about the test pyramid, maybe for different reasons, it is difficult to test that functionality at that level, and just deleting that test but making sure in another way it is tested might be as good as it. And if nothing works, you can at least make fun of it. So I made some images, because I think that an image is worth 1,000 words. I think that it is a difficult message to pass, and developers can be very frustrating, and it can be really annoying to just have someone complaining all day long that this happened again and again and being angry. So I think that making a little fun of it is a good way to pass the message, and people are going to remember it. So the icons you see, these were made by this fantastic artist. I made these wonderful elephants. And thank you very much. This was all for me. If you have feedback, I'm more than happy. If you want to know anything, you have questions, I'm here for you.